Hello and welcome back to Thrive, where Wellbeing Converges for your second part of our interview with Jade Nicholson, our Executive Director of Client Relationships. Now, the first part was very fascinating, super interesting, and I highly recommend, if you haven't already and you've stumbled across this one, is jump back to part one and have a listen. As you know, we're going to be highlighting a couple of bit areas from there, but this one is actually, we're going to get into some more granular details to learn more about you, Jade, and find out how you balance, how you sort of navigate work life balance, and how you sort of deal with being in leadership and all those different roads that you have to traverse in those aspects. So thank you so much for coming back on for part two.
Thank you for having me again.
Yeah, brilliant. So for anyone who may be listening to this who hasn't listened to part one, can you just tell listeners a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, of course. I guess it was really interesting as part of part one, reflecting on my journey, because I think something about myself, and I don't know how many people can resonate with this, is I'm constantly moving quite fast, and always thinking kind of ahead of myself, which, in the role that I do as an executive, in a business that is growing, the need for wellbeing services at organisations now is in high demand, but also quality. So I find naturally my energy in the way I work, I'm always very fast moving and thinking of the next thing and thinking of solutions. However, upon reflecting in the last 12 months, and in particular being in this role, being present in the moment has been key. And that's also part of that work-life balance piece. But I've learned that while being here at Converge, coming up to 7 or 8 years of being part of this business, because you have to be present, you have to be in the moment. So, I've had a long journey before Converge, which I know we'll probably talk about at some point, but it was also about me kind of taking those skills and bringing them on my journey here at Converge to inevitably get me into a senior leadership role, which for me has been an incredible journey and something I had no idea that I was actually going to achieve.
Yeah, definitely. And I think as well, something from my perspective is when I've obviously been drip fed bits and pieces of your story. You've told me little bits here and there, but it was actually really fascinating to go through the whole process and actually listen to your journey. It's actually truly inspiring. So, and I would like to preference, I have heard the full story now. We had a tech issue, so we actually are re-recording part two. So strap yourselves in because it is extremely fascinating story to be to hear. So let's jump straight into it then. So I guess being in your role, being the executive director of client relationships, and then obviously with previous roles in the contact center and also in the psychometric testing team and part of the partnerships team as well. There has to be like this love of connecting with people. So where did that come from? Did it start in your journey in retail, or was it even further back? So where did it all start?
I definitely would have started further back. For me, I think I realized at a really young age, firstly, I got my energy source from being around people, a true extrovert at that time, but we won't get into that because I think now I'm an introvert extrovert. But anyway, so for me, I always really found I often felt my best when I was around people, and particularly when it came to working together to build solutions or achieve goals. So I was a cub when I was younger. So I
Like the Girl Scouts.
like Girl Scouts kind of thing. So I was a cub, and then I went into being a scout, and I probably underestimated, as much as that was only a really small chapter in my life. That's kind of where my love for being part of community, connecting with people, and working together to achieve goals, which at the time, obviously, as a 7-year-old version of Jay didn't realize that's what it was. But I knew it made me feel good. It builds the skills and the foundations, and that's how I knew that's what made me feel good. So I think naturally I've then just taken that feeling with me in my roles, and then grown from that, and then learned the technical skills and abilities that go with that. But for me, that's just kind of in my nature, is how I am as a leader and how I operate as a business. Is your people are key to everything. Your people need to be with you on a journey, working together, and that for me is so incredibly important, is having a really people-centered approach. So
yeah, and does that tie into as well like your relationships with getting to know like the partner organizations that we work with?
It's the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So regardless of it being personal for me or social or work related, they are the fundamentals, that I work within, and also my team,
Yeah.
fortunately, that I get to work with daily is we take that same approach with our partners. It's kind of not like a supplier partner arrangement. It's actually slowing down and having meaningful conversations, approaching things together with a connectedness, and understanding what everyone's needs are. So again, it's really just connecting in with people to understand what are your goals, what are your drivers, what are you wanting to achieve, and that frames really why we are different here when it does come to partnership. Is it's actually about human connection and interaction with our organizations to get the best outcomes for employees, because not one or two organizations are the same. Everyone is different. Everyone has a different goal that they want to achieve, and the only way that Converge can understand that is by forming an actual humanistic relationship with our partners.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess sort of expounding on that has relationship building always been something you've enjoyed about the type of work you do? Now, I know you said that you're quite extroverted, but is there times where you've gone, okay, like it can feel like a bit like more energy that I need to sort of exude in these circumstances?
Yeah, it does. I think anything related to technically customer service, because that's such a people-centered model, and that goes back to my retail days. It takes a lot of energy to be able to keep your mind in a positive mindset, because it is quite easy. Bad things happen on a daily basis, and you think, oh gosh, I've got another point of feedback, or there's been a complaint, or something didn't go to plan. But because of what we do and connecting with people and keeping in true partnership, you can't let that kind of show. So I think this energy source between kind of working through what's happening for you, either personal or at work, and they're not the great things, you still have to front up and represent a brand and support those individuals. So that's where I find it can be quite fatiguing. But again, I think it's just that being in that present moment for that time to be able to check yourself when you're like, oh no, I need to pack that to deal with it later. While I'm in front of the client partner, I need to make sure I'm listening, I'm giving them quality and relevant information, I'm finding solutions and outcomes for them, which can be exhausting at times, but it's always just about recentering yourself before you go in. Take that breath, focus on what's in front of you, and then we're going to deal with the other stuff at a later date.
Yeah, because I suppose I reckon that would like truly resonate with everyone who is listening or watching this episode, is that we're all human, and we all do like to interact. Social is a very innate part of our makeup, of our DNA. So I think that truly will resonate with a lot of people, being like, okay, like I can find it a bit difficult, but that sort of strategy is very handy, I think.
It is, and it's not perfect. You're going to go into meetings sometimes and you're not going to be yourself. But again, I think when you look at forming partnerships with colleagues, friends, or like in our instances, the partnership organisation, when you form a genuine partnership with someone, they will also know when you maybe are having a day where you don't have as much energy, or you just seem a little bit tired or a little bit off, because again, that's part of building a true, genuine connection with somebody. And it's not obviously an excuse to be rude or anything like that. That's obviously not the place for this, but it's okay sometimes to identify, like Jade looked a little bit off in that meeting. But understanding, she's probably had a lot on at work, but we still get the outcomes that we need. We still had a robust quality conversation. It's just part of forming true relationships with people that there will be times where you might not be 100% yourself.
Yeah, definitely. So I'd like to sort of talk a little bit, because you've obviously alluded slightly to a bit of a self-care strategy there. I'd like to actually find out your self-care strategy and what you do to sort of make sure that you're grounding yourself and that you're able to be available, per se, for yourself, but also for your family, your friends, your colleagues. Yeah.
So my self-care strategy has been a journey within itself. I have learned a lot about myself, particularly in the last few years. And I guess my strategies have been different at different points of time for me, because I was looking back and maybe in my early career when I was working in retail and I was a younger leader, balancing social life and all of those things and new relationships, my self-care would have looked really different to what it does now.
It evolves, doesn't it?
It evolves. I think that's what the most important thing. There is no one way of self-care being perfect, because you evolve and you change, and it's about finding what works for you in that moment. But for me, I need to make sure that it's got to be practical self-care. I find that works really well for me, and doesn't matter if it's 5 minutes or 5 hours. I think I'd put a lot of pressure on myself on what self-care should look like, but it looks different to everyone. So for me, self-care looks like 5 minutes. Where I'm able to kind of take a breath and reset. Whereas before I would have thought, oh no, I need to do more than 5 minutes. Well, you don't, because self-care is your choice and you're the individual. So for me, exercise is really important. So an incidental exercise is really important for me. And that was part of some goals I had set. And I've listened to Kate Page's podcast about setting goals. And it's about setting realistic goals and not kind of measuring yourself against someone else. So for me, incidental exercise is really important. I'm in a position where I can walk to and from work. So that just really helps me also unwind for the day or prepare for the day, so then I can be the best version of myself, I guess, at that point, to be ready for my family. But gym, I love gym. I love lifting weights. That was a journey I started maybe only 10 years ago, and I've done it on and off. I've not been perfect, but that for me, that physical movement and that strength in my body is really important. And saying no to things. I know that sounds really silly as a self-care strategy.
Big things though, because I do know that I think there's research behind this, is that you do need to sometimes say no to things. I know, obviously, just alluded to Kate Page's episode, so go and have a listen to that one. That was our February episode. But actually being able to say no to things and have that sort of that boundary. Yes. If you're constantly saying yes to everything, you're just going to overwhelm yourself.
No, completely. And that's something I've been on a really big journey, and I've still got a long way to go. I know myself, I'm quite high people pleasing, which, is okay. It's set its purpose for me. But now it is okay to say no to a friend or a family member or a project at work, and just explaining the reasons why. I think that's the communication that needs to follow the no, because if it comes really out of character, it may not come across the way you had intended it, but where you just explain what's actually happening for you at the moment, and to say, oh, unfortunately I can't attend that because I've had 5 really big weekends busy with family things. I really just want to take a weekend for myself. And again, about that true human connection, it's okay to be honest in those situations and really feel free of judgment. And again, that's about surrounding yourself with the right people, though, as well, which is a journey within itself. But when you start to focus on your boundaries, setting yourself your small, tangible goals, you find your community naturally form to that, or it changes. So just to support you to be able to do what you want to achieve.
Yeah, definitely. And I think as well, you've also mentioned this before to me in the past, where you were saying that when you're on the tram or on the train or something, that you like journal things as well.
Yeah, because my mind moves quite fast. I found for me is to unpack it and write it down. Acknowledges the thought or the idea or the solution or whatever it might be. Pop it into some writing and then come back and revisit that. So it's not something that sits in my mind. I take it home, I think about it in bed. I just find that acknowledgement of it and getting it written down is incredibly important. I just use the notes on my phone or I use Memo, which I look a little bit silly on the tram talking to myself. But if anyone's on the tram with me, it's just me getting it out of my mind and getting it ready to make a plan. And that can be anything, personal, work-related, social, any ideas. But that's really helped me be able to kind of be present back in that moment, which is a huge strategy for me, is to feel present in those moments when I can.
Definitely, because I think as well, like, there's always instances where our minds are just racing.
Yeah.
And then you might forget later on in the day or the next day or in a week that you've thought of something really key, but then you've forgotten about it. So journaling
because
can
you've
really help.
moved on to it. But it's also journaling and going back to reflect on it, which is a habit that you do need to build. I am the queen of like journaling and doing my voice memos, and then randomly I look back a month later and go, oh my gosh, I had these amazing ideas, and some of them have come to light and some of them have worked really well, and then I've forgotten about these. So just making sure that you have time to go back and reflect, because I think because we are moving so fast in this new society, and in particular this is related to me, sometimes we can just lose sight of how far we've come and celebrate that, and then we put more pressure on ourselves. So that going back and reflecting is really important.
Yeah, because I know in like past roles that I've worked in, it was always sort of like there was this culture of you're only as good as yesterday. And then whatever you've done in the past is just forgotten about, which not helpful.
No.
So but that reflection piece.
The reflection piece is incredibly important. And I even got called out in a meeting, as in I called out myself in a meeting today that we had with the senior leadership team. We're very fortunate to have a new partner come on board. And I was so busy going into implementation and meeting the partner and getting everything set up that I actually didn't make space to celebrate the hard work that everyone had contributed, which is good because then again, as part of the community I've built here at Converge and my colleagues is it's okay to say, Jade, slow down, celebrate that. I'm like, no, you're right. I need to take a moment. So that's where I realized that reflection piece and being able to celebrate how far you've come, no matter how big or small it is. You want to use that energy to keep that momentum and feel fulfilled in the role, because you can just get bogged down if you keep thinking too far ahead because you're never actually going to be celebrating what you've achieved.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think that truly will resonate with a lot of people where it goes, like, we all accomplish a lot in our lives, and we can accomplish a lot in a day. We can accomplish a lot in 20 minutes, half an hour, 10 minutes even. And not actually going back to reflect on that accomplishment that you've actually achieved, I think you're almost sort of doing a disservice to yourself, because celebrate those key milestones and celebrate those. I love that. I think that's awesome.
Hence why that kind of walking to and from work for me, or the journaling, because I actually slow it down and go, oh, you achieved a lot today. That's where I find it's the most important part of the day for me.
Yeah, definitely. So I'd like to also sort of delve deeper into that work-life balance, and obviously we've got your strategy. How does that sort of look on a day-to-day basis with, obviously you're a senior leader with a lot of responsibilities, high workload. You've also got a family, young family as well, and something that our listeners probably don't know about you as well. You've got a child with a disability too.
Yeah.
So how do you navigate that, but make sure that you have time for yourself?
Yeah. It's hard. I think not 1 or 2 days again are the same. So for me, my son's diagnosis with autism, level 3. He's nonverbal and he's 4 years old. That really changed the way that I had to balance work. At the time, it was really interesting. Again, this is just my experience. I didn't want anyone to know, because I didn't want to feel judged, or that I wasn't going to still invest the same amount of my time and my energy and my skills into the role. But over time, I realized this was actually part of my journey, if anything, to make me a better leader, to be able to support others that had different family dynamics. And that it's okay, you can still be incredibly successful and work hard, but still have time for you and your family. So I'm very fortunate that we set up very quickly, when my son got his diagnosis, a way in which our family could operate to support him, support me, and support everyone else. So my husband is a full-time carer. And again, I'm incredibly grateful that we're in a position where we can make that work. But we were quite determined that that's the path we wanted for our son, and obviously our daughter, who's a little bit older. So we had to make sure she was cared for as well. And then also what I found is actually feeling okay that I could share it with my colleagues at a senior leadership level. I know for some people it's completely your choice. However, for me, I'm very guarded. I realised as part of my growth, I did have to share that there was a change in my family, and that this was going to be really important. And if anything, it was all in my head at the time where I thought I was going to be judged. It's actually been the opposite. And if anything, for me, I found it quite nice that I could have open conversations about my family, because I spend so much time at work. The relationships I have with my colleagues are very similar to family, just a little bit different, that I did want to be able to share that with colleagues at work. And sometimes it was explaining I need time off, or start a little bit later, or accommodate a medical appointment. And that's completely fine. That's what we do with organisations. And I think there's been a big evolution as well, particularly over the last 10 years, that those things are okay, and it doesn't make you any less of a leader because you have to prioritise your family. So that's been a big journey for me. Having time for myself, again, going back to my self-care strategy, it's knowing that 5 minutes is good. It doesn't have to be a certain amount of time, but it does need to be for you. But that comes down to communication. Communicating with your partner and your family on what you want to achieve. Because I found where my frustration stemmed from is I had all of the things in my head on what I wanted to do, and it might have been, going for a facial. I don't know if people do that, but I didn't actually communicate it, but then I expected everyone just to know what I was doing. And I realized, that was 100% on me, where I didn't tell my partner enough in advance that I did have a 12 o'clock appointment booked to just go and have some time for myself, which he was fine with, but I didn't communicate that. So that's on me. So I just found ways in the house is we keep lots of notes on the wall. We have a little, one of those magnetic calendars that you use the whiteboard markers. And that's to make sure, though, that everyone in my family also feels they have time and space. My son, it is quite challenging. and it can be quite overwhelming for my partner as a full-time carer. So I've also got to make sure he has space as much as, caring is a full-time role. I need to make sure he's also got his outlet for care as well, because if not, the family dynamics, when everyone stops communicating and everyone's a bit grumpy because we haven't shared how we're thinking or what we're feeling, becomes really challenging. So that's been really big for me in the last 4 years. So.
Yeah, definitely. Because I think it's one of those things as well, like you were talking about before with your colleagues and stuff like that. You spend like 80% of your life at work. Like I probably see my boss more than I see my partner in a week. So it's one of those things. I think it's very key. And do you think that sort of I think we're all guarded in some way at work. There's, not you don't want to share all your deepest, darkest secrets with your colleagues, that kind of thing. Yeah. But do you feel like it may derive from some form of stigmatization in that area, or?
Yeah, I think it might. So this again is just kind of my opinion. Work still has to deliver business outcomes. And I think that's probably where that shift between a personal relationship and a work relationship stems from, because you still need to set boundaries in your relationships at work, because it's got to be professional. And when I was talking in the first episode, I was reflecting on a journey that I had in retail, but it was one of the best forms of feedback that I'd ever been given, where my state manager said to me they'd never seen somebody that can build a personal relationship but still keep the professional boundaries. And that's a skill that I've had. It can blur, and it's really easy, and it can be quite challenging, and I've blurred it at times, don't get me wrong. I'm not perfect, but that feedback for me was critical to understand. Having a personal approach and treating people as individuals is incredibly important to ensure we get professional outcomes. So I think that's why the depth of the relationship is a little bit different from what you would have at work to personal, but that is really, really important. And when I reflect on some of the best leaders I've ever had in my life, it was those that had those same traits, being able to still engage personally and have an understanding, but still be very professional at the same time to still get the outcomes that are required from the organisation.
Yeah, it's probably a blend, isn't it, of like, you can have that sort of personalised relationship, but also be business focused.
Of course you can.
Because it can go either way. If you're too business focused, then you can sort of taint relationships. But then if you're not professional enough,
exactly, has the same risks.
It's even a problem. So
exactly. So
definitely. Brilliant. So how has your life changed since having children, and particularly having a child with a disability, and especially when we were talking before in the first episode about the pandemic?
Yeah.
So working from home, senior leadership.
Yeah, I was getting promotions during that time. The whole the landscape of wellbeing shifted so fast. The demand in what we do here at Converge and the quality in that really was a big shift. And my life changed a lot, particularly with the arrival of my second child. So, oh gosh, where would I even begin in how it has changed, particularly around my family? So for me, I realise as well that I'm a role model for my children. That's probably where my mindset really shifted, and particularly for my daughter, who has just turned 12. She's just started high school. And I was reflecting back on the first podcast about me and my experience in high school and my goals, and I didn't really have any. And I realise now it's critical for me to lead not only with my career, because that's really, really important to me, and that was one of my goals, and that's for me how I measure a lot of my success. And I know it probably sounds wrong, but it is. My career is really important to me. So allowing my daughter to see me as a role model, but also be herself, which again is that balance. So really for me, the family dynamics shifted because I realised how important I was to demonstrate and role model for my family, regardless of what they want to achieve, but support them on that journey. So hence by being present was so incredibly important to be able to tap in. Obviously, my son, our journey with that was really different. Because I didn't even know what autism was when we got the diagnosis. And to share a little bit of a story, which shows you kind of how work and my career are really fundamental also in my family, as much as family is fundamental in work. So I was really challenged to get my son his diagnosis, but I knew there was something that we needed to diagnose for him. So I think he was around about maybe 15 or 16 months old. I had been dismissed by doctors many times, but this time I said, oh no, just like please give me a referral to a paediatrician. I guess I was so confident that it was nothing and that he was okay, just maybe some development delays. I actually sent my husband to the appointment
Okay.
and I worked. So I was in a boardroom doing a strategy day and we're having a great day. And I got a text from my partner that said, hey, you need to call me. I've just finished the appointment. And again, I just wasn't really in that mindset because work was my focus at that point. And I took the call and I had a colleague next to me and my partner said to me, I need to let you know he's got autism. And I said, okay, great. This is so good. We can now plan what we need to do to support him and how we need to change as parents. And then he said, oh, well, it's level 3. And it took me a moment and I thought, oh, level 3, I've never heard, like we didn't know the language. And then I said, level 3 out of what? Because level 3 out of 100, I don't know what this is. And he goes, level 3 out of 3, he's the highest. And then I remember at that point, I actually immediately broke down. I started to cry. I still get emotional now, but it's a different journey now. And my colleague was with me. But the point of that story was, I think that was the first time I realized that work and personal were always going to be together in this journey for me, my partner, my children, and my family. And that kind of really shifted that journey. And then it was a whole learning curve for me with my family, the dynamics with my daughter, the dynamics with my son, skilling me and my partner up on how we manage in the best way possible. Getting advice and feedback was so incredibly important, but starting that journey together was really important and knowing that work was going to be on that journey with me. I'm not quite sure if I answered that question,
No,
Curtis.
did. No, definitely.
But I just reflected and that was a really pivotal moment for me where the whole, my whole universe changed at that point. So,
yeah, and I quite like as well because I think no one's right or wrong in these situations. And I think when you hear that sort of news, I think your outlook was quite inspiring in the fact that you were able to go, okay, well, how can we support him?
Yeah.
How can we, alter things to make his world
yes,
better for him?
yeah,
And sort of because it's one of those ones, like it's one of those things that, like you hear about autism and you hear about, sort of disabilities and things like that. But until it actually impacts you, you don't truly understand it, unless maybe you're in that field. But even then, you still have sort of secondhand perception.
It's a different exposure to it. And for us, honestly, it was one of the best things that ever happened. It challenged us as parents. It challenged me. And I've learned so much from it. And I think when I was talking to Kate actually about it, Kate was one of the first people I told about the diagnosis. And she said the same thing. She goes, but your mindset has always been great. Now we know next is about planning what we need to do to best support him and how us as a family work together. And, it's even funny, like explaining it to extended family members. That was another big challenge, with my mum and dad and them being supporting. And it was also really weird though. There was this grief period, and to be very honest, again, this is just my journey. There was a grief period, and I think work was really helpful at that point. And I think because work and the diagnosis had kind of come together, I felt really supported by it. People were checking in, but it was kind of this grief period where how I had expected him to be was no longer going to be there. Whereas I don't feel that same way anymore because I see him as a unique individual, as we should see anyone. But now it's really different and we celebrate different milestones. We've got special care for him. And I said, what would be a goal? And me and my partner looked at each other and we said, we just want to go out for a dinner where he's also comfortable to go out to dinner. So our life shifted in that way, whereas work for me is my consistent and where I've got, I'm not going to say normal, but like a really good routine, whereas our home life has to be kind of modified and our goals are different now. So we're yet to kind of get to the point where we can take him comfortably to a restaurant where he will enjoy and we will enjoy. But I have found TGI Fridays is the best way we have been able to accommodate him so far. But again, it's a really big change in how you live your life. So for us, that was actually a really big blessing for us to be able to have him and work with him and learn so much about it.
Yeah, definitely. My partner, she's a teacher, but she also works in disability support and things like that. And she would often tell me like, oh well, look, we actually got the child she was caring for to do a certain task or complete something, and to someone who's neurotypical, it can come across like you're like, oh okay. But that's such a massive milestone, and it's
big milestone.
So and I think it's sort of realizing, and I hope this is actually this is coming across as a teaching to people who are listening to this or watching this, that people have their own journeys, and yeah, you just got to celebrate them.
You have to celebrate it, exactly.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for being so candid about that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. And then I suppose as well, sort of pivoting now to sort of, it's obviously International Women's Day this month. So
Yes.
obviously we're recording this in March for anyone, if you're listening to this maybe in October, later in the year. But yeah, so this month is International Women's Day, and obviously you're a woman in a senior role. And I'd like to sort of talk a little bit about that as well. So how do you feel being a woman in leadership? And actually, and obviously you spoke about it previously with your daughter, as being a role model. Yeah, how do you sort of see yourself in that lens?
Yeah, well, it's interesting as a general topic to talk about, and I think we've been talking about women in leadership for decades and years, and it's evolved. I think, firstly, I want to say this: thank you to all of the incredible leaders that identified as women that helped me get to this place. So I do want to acknowledge that this is hundreds of years of women advocating for rights and equal opportunity, and I'm so fortunate. I live in a time like now, which is going to evolve again. Nothing is static and everything keeps moving. So that's kind of how I see this as well, as in it's a journey and it's a togetherness when women are in leadership. Very fortunate as well for more and more organisations to embrace and have a really good diversified leadership that allow women, men, people that identify in different ways to be part of it, because it really comes down to a skill set and a capability. As much as it's wonderful to celebrate women in leadership, it'll be really interesting to see what this looks like in the future for our future women in generations. So for me, I'm very grateful of the community and the people that have advocated to allow me to get to this space and continue to grow in this space and be supported.
Yeah. So when you look back on your journey and you reflect on everything that you've done to get you to the point where you're at, are you proud of what you've achieved?
Oh my gosh, I'm so proud. For me, this stems right the way back to high school, and I know I spoke about that, to a young woman who didn't. She had direction, she just didn't have recognized direction, and didn't actually believe in her capability. So for me, I'm really, really proud of what I've achieved. And again, thanking those people that helped me on the journey, as much as I didn't probably see it at that time. I now reflect back and see how there's so many influential women that helped me to get here. So yeah, which is huge.
Yeah, brilliant. And I suppose as well, just on the back of that, do you hope to inspire more women to sort of go into these roles and reach for the stars?
Oh my gosh, of course.
Yeah.
For me, advice that I would give to anyone that wants to be in a leadership role, senior leadership role, own a business, be an influencer, I don't care what it is, but anything that is about connecting people with community, leading people and supporting people, is just firstly, say it loud and proud. Vocalize what you want to achieve, connect with like-minded people, and go on that journey and understand today and tomorrow will be two different things, but keep growing and evolving from that. It's incredibly important to know that you matter and you can make a difference.
Yeah, definitely. But obviously, you've achieved so much in your career, and obviously being able to learn from you is obviously a massive pleasure of mine. But at the same time, like, do you experience sort of negative fallouts from it? So things like imposter syndrome, things like that.
Yeah. Of course you do. Well, of course I do. So that little voice that has a narrative inside is always there. Particularly for me, it's always been there. I know for me, I acknowledge it. I think kind of dismissing it is not helpful in my experience, but it's acknowledging it. But then it's actually challenge it.
Yes.
Acknowledge it, but challenge it. Where is this coming from? Try and get to a point where you can find fact in what that's telling you, because I lead quite highly with emotion as well. I have a high empath, and that's okay. I think that's again what makes me succeed in this role. But sometimes I can lead with maybe too much emotion. But again, that's because I take time to reflect on myself and work out why did I respond in that way. But I think with imposter syndrome, or that inner voice that you have, acknowledge it and then unpack it a little bit, but don't get hyper fixated on it, because everything that you say to yourself is important, but it's working out where did it come from and why, and then how can I turn this around, because sometimes it's actually not truth in what it's telling you, and sometimes it's a lesson to be learned.
Yeah, it's just telling like that little voice in the back of your head, just turn off.
It's like, I know you're there. Okay, great. Let's write it down. Let's unpack it, but I'll think about it in a different way.
Yeah, definitely. Because I think as well, I suppose it would be good as well. Like, can you think of like an anecdote or any sort of time where, and if you don't stress, but if you do have a time where like you experience some form of imposter syndrome and you thought to yourself, okay, this is a challenge.
Yeah.
This is how I'm going to overcome it. Was there like a catalyst for a moment?
Yeah, there is. There's multiple moments, and I know what they are. So for me, I find when I have the biggest moments of self doubt, when my inner voice talks to me, it's because I'm comparing myself to others.
Yeah.
That
I think
is
a lot of us experience
that
that.
is
I
the
experienced
number
that.
one
Yeah.
trigger for me when I do have those points of self-doubt is I might leave a meeting and I might start second guessing something I've said in that meeting. Regardless, it wasn't, rude, or it wasn't criticizing anyone else. It wasn't wrong or right. I just find that when I leave and I may be reflecting on that, and that inner voice is going, oh, why'd you say that? That was silly. I have to stop, because then what I'm doing is I'm obviously comparing myself to somebody else that was in that room. And we know this is that's something we shouldn't do. And I know in the society we're getting better. There's more people representing different types of people, which is great. But that comparison for me is where I just go, stop comparing yourself. You've responded in this way. That was the reason why. And you know what? You move forward from it. And it's either to learn from it if you did make a mistake, or it's to embrace it because you didn't, and you need to believe in yourself.
Yeah, definitely. Because I think many of us go through that. I go through that.
I do it every day. I'm always comparing
Same.
myself, either socially or at work or physically. Like, it's just, but it's something you need to be aware of, because that can really contribute to the negative self-talk as opposed to the positive self-talk, because that inner voice you want, but you want it to be positive and aspiring.
Yeah, because I think it's one of those things as well that, like, at work, you do naturally go through comparisons. Like, someone might compare me to a colleague or someone,
or to a predecessor in a role. They're like, well, this person didn't do it this way. Then all of a sudden you're like, oh no, is that good or bad?
Yeah, exactly. So I think there's obviously like a bit of a healthy balance with imposter syndrome, being like, okay, well, I could have done this differently to achieve this better outcome that this person may have done a bit better than I can, or I need to upskill to sort of manage, but doing it in a healthy way.
Correct. Yeah, always. And that's why I think that acknowledgement of what you're hearing or how you're feeling is first, and then being able to kind of take that and work out what's underlying, because that's the only way to kind of move yourself forward with that.
Yeah, definitely. So, last couple of questions for you. How's
Sure.
your energy? Going well?
We're doing it.
Brilliant. So, if you could tell your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be?
Oh, it's very simple, and I think you probably heard it in this. Believe in yourself, because you are good enough. Yeah, that was really big part of my journey, is probably underestimating my capability, because I truly didn't believe in myself.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, because I think it's one of those things that when you look back on life, you're kind of like, did I believe myself in this aspect, or could I have done better in this one? And sometimes having those regrets, it can be healthy, and it can be said, to a degree, obviously. So yeah, no, brilliant. Great advice. I think a lot of people will take a lot from that.
And the younger self probably still wouldn't have listened to it, but now everything in hindsight always looks good. But
would our younger self really listen to us?
I know, that's what I was thinking. But if I did have that chance, that would be the one thing I'd say. And I'd be also saying, listen to the people that are influencing you in a positive way. Take their advice, take their guidance. They're investing in you.
Yeah, feedback, whether or not it's harsh or not, sometimes it can be.
I love feedback. It's a way of growth. And those who give it to you in a constructive way are those that care about you most to get the best results.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess my final question then, what do you hope to achieve in the future, and what advice do you have for other women striving to achieve what you have?
Oh, gosh.
Big loaded question.
I know it's a big question, and because I'm so future focused and forward thinking. So for me, for my future, I would really like to be in a position where I can work with more individuals from a coaching and mentoring perspective, as much as my role is primarily, if we look at the basis of it, is about partnership, and it's about driving revenue. So that's from an organizational perspective, that's what it's all about. But I'd really like to be in a position that I can have a side hustle, let's just say this, where I can support the next generation of young people going into leadership roles, and to be able to support them and guide them on their journey. That's just kind of a personal goal for me. And again, my advice to anyone would be, if you are striving to be in leadership and you identify as a woman, please just use your voice. let people know what you want to achieve and go seek those opportunities. I think that is so incredibly important. Invest in your personal development is absolutely key as well, and take opportunities as much as they feel scary. Just dive in, give it a go, and have an experience.
Yeah. You're always going to learn. Like you're never going to learn if you don't fail.
No,
So,
no, exactly. And I
throw
think
yourself into everything.
you need to just get yourself out there and be exposed to different experiences and different people, to be able to get you to where you want to be inevitably, regardless of what that is. If it's an exec role, or if it's, like I said, owning a business, becoming an influencer, whatever that looks like for you, because success looks different to everyone.
Yeah. It was one of our past episodes. I think it was the Christmas one with Tabitha. She was talking about how when you go like with Christmas parties and things like that, and if you're not truly extroverted or you're too introverted or something like that, if that's even a thing, you can almost shield yourself away from these situations, or you can take yourself away from these things. And I think a great piece of advice that I'd like to reiterate from what Tabitha said is just take 30 seconds of courage and just jump straight into it, and you never know, it could be one of the best things you've ever done. Exactly.
Those small moments can have the biggest impact on you. So yeah, I would agree with that. Just take those opportunities when they come.
Yeah, definitely. That was a great, powerful way to end the episode. And again, thank you so much, Jade, for coming back on and coming on in general, and telling your story and being so candid and open and honest. And I think a lot of people are going to really find inspiration from this episode. So yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Anytime. I'm hoping to get you on again in the not too distant future. But thank you so much, everyone, for listening and watching. This has been Thrive, where wellbeing converges. And we'll see you very soon for the next episode 9, I'm pretty sure it is. But in the meantime, if you ever need support and we're your workplace wellbeing provider, please pick up the phone or jump on our website or jump on the Converge app and book an appointment. We're always here for you anytime, anywhere. So thank you again, and we'll see you soon for the next episode next month.